Hey guys, this is our next lesson on finding determinants and inverses of 3x3 matrices. You would think that these are not going to be that much more complicated than a 2x2 matrix because it's just a little bit bigger, but finding these is a lot more complicated. So I'm going to show you the by hand methods, but in a moment I'm actually going to teach you how to do this on your calculator because your calculator can do it and it's a whole lot easier on there. So if this goes over your head, I apologize for making you listen to it for a few minutes, but I just wanted to teach you this. Those of you that might be taking college courses in math, you might have to know how to do this by hand. Also, those of you on math team, this is really good to know. So first off, it's using what are called cofactors. So cofactors are looking at the top row of matrices, the top row of the matrix, and picking these whole numbers, but they have to have specific signs. So it goes in a pattern. It goes positive, negative, positive. So the first cofactor is 3. And then you're going to take that cofactor and you're going to multiply it by the determinant of the 2x2 that would be formed if we crossed off the row and column that we're looking at for the cofactor. So that's going to be, I need a little bit more room, 3 times the determinant of that little matrix down here that gets formed would be 5 minus 0. And then we're going to add that with moving on to the next cofactor, looking at 4, but that's really going to be negative 4. And if I cross off that column and that row, I'd be looking at this guy right now as my matrix. So the matrix would be 3, negative 1, 0, 1. So that determinant is going to be 3 minus 0. And then we move to the last cofactor, which would be negative 2. I'm out of space here. I'm writing too big. Negative 2 times, sorry guys. If I cross off those row and columns, I'd be looking at this matrix. So that's going to be 12 minus negative 5, so plus positive. And now let's just simplify this down. That's really going to be 15 plus negative 12 plus negative 34. So we get a final answer of negative 31. Okay? That's one method of doing this by hand. The other method, which I find easier, this is the way I learned it in school, is you can expand the columns. We would take the first 2 columns and just rewrite them. So the first column is 3, 3, negative 1, and the next one is 4, 5, 4. And then we do this actually super similar to the 2x2s, but we have to do it 3 times. So you're going to do this diagonal, this diagonal, this diagonal. You're going to do the product of each of the diagonals added together. So that's going to be 15 plus 0 plus, that's negative 6, negative 24. And then this is minus, just like when we do the diagonals, of a 2x2. And then we're going to go the other way. We're going to do this diagonal, this diagonal, this diagonal. That's why we had to expand it so we could see all 3 diagonals. So that's going to be positive 10 plus 0 plus 12. So I get negative 9 minus 22, which gives me the same answer as negative 31. So just kind of a cool way to do it by hand. But now, let's learn some things on your calculator. So if you don't have your calculator out, grab it, or open up the TI Inspire app that I told you guys you could download yesterday. So all different matrix operations can be performed on your calculator. So you see at the top here that it gives you the instructions on where to go. You're not going to see me doing a video type this actually into the calculator. So the first thing I'm going to show you is just how to do basic operations on the calculator and how to type these in. So in the screen before, at the top, you see that this button right here next to the 9, that's going to be your important button to be able to enter a matrix into your calculator. So if I want to enter in number 1, the first thing I'm going to do is put the 3 in. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit this button. And that button, if you look at the second row here, this is where it gives you all the matrices. So the first one's a 2x2, the next one's a 1x2, this is a 2x1, And then the 3 by 3 isn't just for 3 by 3s, it'll actually allow you to enter any size matrix because it'll let you change the rows and columns. So for number 1, we're just entering in a 2 by 2. Easiest way to go from one number to the next, we put in 2 first, is hitting this tab button here on the left. If you hit that, it'll go to the next one on that row, 2, then hit it again, it'll jump to the next row, 3, 1, and then 3, whoops. And then it's going to be -2, and then we want to put another 2 by 2 matrix. So we're going to hit this number next to the 9 again. It's right there on 2 by 2, so we're just going to hit enter. And then we can put in the other matrix. It's -2, tab 4, oops, tab 4, tab 3, tab 0, and you just hit enter, and you write that down as your answer. So this equals 10, 4, -3, 9. And now here's another video to do the second one. Alright, what's different in number 2 is they want us to put a 3 by 3 in. So let me show you what happens when you try to do that. So if you hit the button again and we go over to 3 by 3, what's going to happen is it's actually going to ask you how many rows and columns you want. The first one in number 2 happens to be a 3 by 3, so we're going to keep that and we're going to enter in our numbers. -2. I'm not hitting tab, sorry. It helps if you're paying attention to which number you're on. 1, 3, 0, 2, 4, -3, -1, 2. And then we have to put in the other matrix, which is a 3 by 1. So when we hit that button next to the 9, there's no 3 by 1 for us to enter, so we're going to pick the 3 by 3 and we're going to change it. We want 3 rows, but only 1 column this time. And then we can enter that in. 3, -1, 4, and hit enter. And this multiplies them just like you were doing on yesterday's in-class assignment, but the calculator is doing all of the work. If we have another assessment on this, you can just use your calculator to do it. You don't have to necessarily do it by hand, but in college they might want you to be able to do it by hand without a calculator, so I taught you that way first. So your answer for number 2 is 5, 14, 0. You're just going to copy it off the calculator. Alright, the next thing we're going to learn to do is how to find the determinant on the calculator. You're just going to have to hit the menu button and find matrix and then find determinant, but I have a video to show you how to do that on your calculator. Alright, so to find the determinant, the first thing you have to do is pull up that function on the calculator. All of the important stuff is in menu, and then you're going to go to, surprisingly, number 7 because it says matrix, and then you want to find the one that says determinant, which is number 3. So you're going to put that'll put DET in front of it, which means it'll find the determinant. And then you have to type the matrix in. So we're going to hit this button next to the 9 again. We want to do a 3 by 3, and we're going to type in the numbers. -3, 1, 0, 2, 4, -1, 5, 6, -2. I do try to double check real quick before I hit enter because the calculator is doing all the work. Just make sure you don't have a number that's wrong. And then you just hit enter, and that's the determinant. It's 5. So you don't have to do all those steps we did on the first page. You can just put it in your calculator and get an answer. So the determinant here is 5. I'd like you to take a minute, try number 2 on your own on your calculator, and I'll post a picture of what it should look like in just a second. So hopefully if you typed it correctly, you got an answer of -31. Alright, one last thing to try today on the calculators. The last thing we're going to do is try to find the inverse. And you're going to hear me stutter along in the video for a second, but if you notice, all we have to do to find the inverse is attach to the -1 power, because if you remember back to when we did the inverse of sine or cosine or tangent, or even the inverse of a function back in chapter 1, we attach to the -1 power, and that means inverse. So you just type that in your calculator, attach to the matrix, and it knows it's supposed to find the inverse. So watch this video to see how to do that. Through finding the inverse. So to find the inverse, the first thing you have to do is type the matrix in. So for the first inverse one for A, I'm going to go ahead and type in, it is 2, 0, 1, 1, 3, -1, 2, 1, 1. And then if you remember what an inverse looks like, it means you have to find, sorry, brain fart. So like if we went back to when we did inverse with sine. Sine, we did sine -1 to do arc sine. So that's the same thing we want to do here, is we actually want to take it to the -1 power. So you're going to use this caret button here to the -1 power, and you just hit enter. And that's what you would copy down as your answer for the inverse. So I'm just going to write that down. That is, the inverse is going to be 4/3, 1/3, -1, -1, 0, 1, -5/3, -2/3, 2. So now I want you to see if you can get the answer for part B on your own. So here's just me doing B real quick. I typed it in already. Again, double check, make sure your numbers are correct. And then it's caret -1 to find the inverse. And that's what you would copy down as the inverse. If you wanted to change them to decimals, you could. Since the calculator gives us fractions, I would just write the fractions out and be done with it. Okay? So hopefully the homework tonight should be pretty easy. I just need you to practice using those two functions, determinants and inverses, on your calculator. If you could please put screenshots of your calculator for your work for each problem, just like I'm also going to have you do that on ClassKick. So once you type it in your calculator and get an answer, take a screenshot, take a picture, and put it in the homework so that way I can see that you guys do know how to put these in your calculators correctly. All right, have a great rest of your